So, I read Caitlyn's book.
Stop.
Yeah.
No matter how closely you keep up with the Kardashians, you may be missing a lot of details about Caitlyn and Kris's relationship. We've seen more than a few of their fights, but did you know they once worked together on an infomercial? Let's take a look back before Kendall and Kylie and see how they ended up going from head over heels to barely being able to stand each other.
And you never really heard my side of the story.
Most of us know Caitlyn Jenner wasn't Kris's first spouse, and she met her first husband when she was still a teenager and in a relationship with someone else. At age 17, Kris was dating professional golfer Cesar Sanudo, despite the fact that he was over a decade her senior. According to Kris, Cesar spent a lot of time on the road for his career, leaving her lonely, which caused her to fall into the arms of another older man, Robert Kardashian.
Mom! Were you hooking up with him?
Yeah.
Oh my god!
We know it sounds super romantic, but there were a few bumps on the way to the altar besides Cesar Sanudo. Robert broke up with Kris in order to start seeing Priscilla Presley, and Kris didn't take that lying down. In fact, she kind of spent the breakup flying because she immediately found work as a flight attendant. Eventually, Robert came back into her life, and though the two moved into his Beverly Hills mansion, it wasn't all glitz and glamour for Kris. While he drove luxury cars, he insisted his girlfriend pay for her own tires for her old Mazda. He told friends he wanted her to learn the value of $1, but that went out the window once they got married. Although she had some more spending power, she also had a ton of responsibilities since she came home from her honeymoon pregnant with Kourtney Kardashian. Soon after, she welcomed Kim, Khloe, and Rob into the family before embarking on what she's since called her lowest point and biggest regret. Kris started up an affair with her personal trainer, Todd Waterman, and when Robert found out, he filed for divorce.
Thought I knew it all. I was young, and you think you're smarter than everybody else.
While Kris was separated from her husband, she agreed to go on a blind date set up by a friend, and soon fell head over heels for Caitlyn Jenner, who had gone through not one, but 2 divorces already. According to Caitlyn, her first wife, Chrystie Crownover, was the first person who knew the truth about her gender identity. Like Kris, Chrystie also worked as a flight attendant and did her best to support her partner both financially and emotionally. The couple had 2 children, Burton and Cassandra, but eventually their marriage ended. Chrystie claimed it wasn't because she didn't accept Caitlyn the way she was, but rather the fact that Caitlyn couldn't accept herself. Learning the truth about Caitlyn was much harder for her second wife, Linda Thompson, who said she didn't suspect a thing before Caitlyn told her the truth.
I crumbled, and she was very apologetic.
They had 2 sons, who have since admitted that they felt abandoned by Caitlyn after their parents divorced. Caitlyn says she doesn't blame Linda for leaving, but having another marriage end left her feeling humiliated and caused her to double down on keeping her secret life, well, a secret. Now it's time for the stories of Kris and Caitlyn to intersect. At the time, Kris had $200 to her name as well as 4 young kids. Despite her life stresses, she fell in love at first sight, and the two were married a mere 5 months later after her divorce from Robert was made official.
Take your time.
You met this wonderful woman, the love of your life, you get married. And of course you wind up having children.
And since this is Kris Jenner we're talking about, you know she wasn't just a wife, she was also Caitlyn's manager. It might be hard to imagine now, but there was a time when Kris Jenner wasn't incredibly wealthy. In fact, she was having to hustle hard and did her best to capitalize on Caitlyn's past as an Olympic athlete. The two collaborated on their own line of stair-climbing equipment, and instead of creating a hit reality TV show, they managed to put together an infomercial. Hey, Super Fit with Bruce Jenner was actually a huge hit and brought the family some much-needed income. Meanwhile, Caitlyn was trying to adapt to being a step-parent to Kourtney, Kim, Khloe, and Rob, who didn't always make it easy, especially Khloe. Kris endured a painful miscarriage and began to worry she would never have another child. Caitlyn had expressed concern about her own ability to procreate, telling Kris that she had taken substances which could have impacted her fertility.
I said I had a condition
that I've been dealing with forever.
But Kris insists she thought Caitlyn was talking about taking performance-enhancing substances during her time as an athlete and not female hormones. At the time, Kris leaned on her close friend Nicole Brown Simpson, who gifted her a bunch of maternity clothes to prove her confidence that Kris would conceive. It was a sweet gesture, but sadly, Nicole didn't live long enough to see Kris become pregnant again. She named her daughter Kendall Nicole Jenner in honor of her friend. Later on, Kris and Caitlyn would have another daughter, Kylie, together. You might have heard of her. Kris and Caitlyn agree that they had many good times together despite their difficulties, but there is one major factor of their marriage they don't see eye to eye on, and that is Caitlyn's transition. According to Caitlyn, she had been on hormones for 4 years by the time she met Kris, and said she was honest about her identity since day one. She says Kris knew the truth before they were married, although
I am sure I downplayed it because at that time I was downplaying it.
Caitlyn's side of the story is that she and Kris thought they could work through this together.
But for the next 23 years, we had a very good life together.
Despite her claim that they were mostly happy, Caitlyn admits her marriage to Kris was far from perfect. Sometimes she felt like a metaphorical punching bag for her wife. At first, having Kris handle the family's finances made perfect sense, but after a couple of decades, Caitlyn grew tired of never seeing her paychecks from keeping up with the Kardashians. But Kris has her own viewpoint on that scenario, claiming that she took care of all household expenses.
She never paid a bill from 1972.
Although there were apparently some hard feelings about their paychecks, Caitlyn says she doesn't regret doing Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and claims it didn't have a negative impact on her marriage to Kris. But there's more than one side to the story, and Kris has denied over and over again that she knew anything about her partner identifying as a woman. She said she was completely blindsided by the revelation, and was furious about the fact that she found out right before a business meeting about Caitlyn's new reality show.
Could have been handled, but in the most amazing, loving way.
We've seen plenty of this marriage on Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and Kris isn't too eager to discuss what happened when the cameras weren't rolling. As hard as it might be to believe, this momager does try to keep her private life private sometimes. And unfortunately for curious fans, this is one of those times. Kris is adamant that she and Caitlyn had a good marriage, and she was clueless about her gender identity for the majority of it.
Did she tell you early on?
No.
Oh, I did too.
She also accused Caitlyn of lying about the reasons for her first 2 marriages not working out.
Kate could have told me the story that she writes about in the book.
Kris did reveal that Caitlyn's behavior often seemed erratic to her, and when she asked about it, she was told she wouldn't understand what was going on.
I have these memories of this life, and I feel sometimes like it didn't exist.
She believes that since Caitlyn wasn't happy with herself, she couldn't be truly happy in their marriage, which is pretty much what her first wife Chrystie Crownover said about their marriage. Kris claimed she always worked hard for her family and accused Caitlyn of looking for someone to blame for her unhappiness with herself. This famous momager says she didn't know Caitlyn identified as a woman, but her kids at least had some clues about what was going on. Kim Kardashian has admitted that when she was in her early 20s, she stumbled upon Caitlyn all dressed up and immediately panicked.
And I just remember thinking, oh my God, I've caught him with this secret.
She took off to Kourtney's house, where the two of them Googled what could be going on with their step-parent before Caitlyn called and told Kim not to tell anyone. Even though this was a new secret to Kim and Kourtney, Kendall and Kylie had known about it since they were kids. According to Kendall, Caitlyn would wake up early and dress as herself before changing clothes and getting the kids ready for school. On one of these occasions, Kendall caught her, although she slipped away before Caitlyn realized what she had seen. When Khloe was a teen, she and Caitlyn had their struggles, but grew close over the years. Khloe claims she wasn't angry about Caitlyn coming out, she just resented the fact that she and Kris found out just before a business meeting and not in a more private setting. She felt pressure to accept the situation immediately, without having room to process her feelings without being in the spotlight. This kicked off a period of estrangement between the two, and Caitlyn claimed she and Khloe didn't speak for 5 to 6 years as a result. As for the rest of the kids in the Kardashian-Jenner family, many of them were livid about Caitlyn's memoir, The Secrets of My Life. They claimed to be fine with her transition, but insisted there was no excuse for publicly trashing Kris in the process.
In our opinion, you don't need to even mention our mom.
Kendall and her dad were always incredibly close, and even she wasn't happy with the way that she portrayed Kris.
I think it's purposeful lying.
she really just thinks that's what happened for some weird reason.
She also had an issue with Caitlyn's complaints regarding the Kardashian siblings.
If you have a problem with them, you raised them.
So how are things years later? Caitlyn is still incredibly close with Kylie and Kendall, and her supermodel daughter says she wants to be an Olympic athlete like her dad someday. She's also had a lot of talks with Kris and the rest of the family, and they're at least on speaking terms. And perhaps most importantly of all, Caitlyn has found her way back on the family party invite list. Kris has always encouraged her kids to take the high road with their children's fathers, and it seems like she's practicing what she preaches.